Chapter 1. The Day She Said I Was Wasting Her Time. Before I tell you how my own daughter looked me in the eye inside a crowded hospital cafe and said I was wasting her time, you need to know one thing. For over a decade, I paid every hidden bill that built her career. Her tuition, her research grants, even the fellowship stipend she bragged about. All of it, and she never knew. She stood on a stage calling herself self-made, while the fund carrying her was mine. And when the hospital's gala lights hit my name for the first time, when the crowd rose to applaud the anonymous donor she had unknowingly depended on, her entire world cracked in front of everyone. I am the MC for today's story, guiding you through how a silent mother became the one person her daughter could no longer ignore. Now, let me take you back to the moment it all began. It was a cold Saturday afternoon in Seattle when I pushed open the door of the little cafe across from Cascade Heart Institute. I had walked there slowly, carrying a warm box of empanadas in one hand and a slim envelope in the other. The air outside still smelled faintly of rain. Inside, the heaters hummed and the windows fogged from the breath of nurses and residents rushing through their short breaks. I chose a table near the corner, the one Celia and I used to sit at when she was still in medical school, and thought coffee with her mother was a comfort rather than an inconvenience. I set the box down carefully, adjusted the envelope beside it, and smoothed the wrinkles in my coat. My heart beat a little faster, even though I told myself to relax. She was busy. I just wanted 20 minutes of her time. Celia arrived in a gust of cold air, still in her pale clinic coat, hair pulled tight, a badge swinging against her chest. She looked exhausted but sharp in that way young doctors often do. Her eyes flicked over the table, saw the box, then moved on quickly, as if it were nothing more than clutter. She said that she had only a short break before scrub time. She never asked how I was. Evan followed behind her, tall, impeccably pressed suit, the kind of man who could walk into any room and assume he belonged at the center of it. He greeted me politely enough, but with a distance I had come to recognize. The look said he considered my world small and unremarkable. Celia asked him to join us for a minute. I tried to make small talk, asked how her week had been. She answered with half words while checking her phone. Evan glanced between us as though watching a conversation he had already judged as unnecessary. I reached for the envelope. My hand moved slowly, almost hesitant even to myself. I told her I had a few papers I hoped she could look at. They were important. I thought if I explained that much, she would at least give me a minute of real attention. She cut me off before I could say more. Her voice was sharper than the clatter of cups behind us. She told me to stop bringing random things. She said I was wasting her time. A nurse walking by paused for a breath, hearing the tail end of her words. Evan stayed silent, and that silence was an agreement. Celia leaned back, already gathering her things. She said she had worked for everything she had and she had to go. There was no anger in her tone. That might have hurt less. It was simply dismissal. Quick, efficient, like removing a stitch that no longer served a purpose. I looked at the box on the table, still warm from the oven that morning. She had not touched it. I nodded, as if her words had been perfectly reasonable. I told her to go handle her shift. She walked out with Evan. He did not look back. For a moment I sat there, letting the hum of conversation around me drown the sharpness in my chest. Then I stood and carried the box to the counter. I asked the barista if she could give it to whoever wanted it. She smiled kindly. People often assume kindness is easy for mothers. They never guess the strength it sometimes takes. Outside, the late afternoon air felt colder than before. I tucked the empty tote into my jacket and walked home. The street lights flickered on as I reached Maple Leaf. My hands were steady, but the space in my chest ached in a quiet, dull way, the kind that never announces itself with tears. That night, I sat at my dining table with a cup of reheated tea, the house silent except for the slow ticking of the clock above the window. I pulled the old storage box from the cabinet. Inside were years of paper, tuition receipts, transfer confirmations, copies of scholarship awards sent to Celia with the donor line left anonymous. The envelope from the cafe lay in the center. I opened it and spread the documents across the table. Numbers, dates, signatures. All the invisible ways I had lifted her path so she could walk without stumbling. My fingers rested on one transfer slip from 2012, another from 2018, another from 2020 when the fund expanded and the hospital sent a letter thanking the anonymous donor who had quietly supported dozens of students. Celia's name appeared more than once. I felt no anger as I gathered the papers into a neat stack, only something steady, almost calm. She believed I had never done anything for her. She believed her success rose from nothing but her own strength. I whispered to the quiet room that if she truly believed that story, then perhaps it was time for another story to be told, one built from paper and truth and years she never saw. I did not know yet how I would begin, only that I would. I turned off the lamp and let the house fall back into darkness, leaving the papers waiting in their silent rows. If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you. Chapter 2. The Years She Never Saw. Sleep did not come easily that night. When it finally did, it pulled me back into years I had tried to pack away. The years when every choice I made seemed to carry the weight of two lives. I woke before sunrise and walked to the kitchen, letting the quiet of the house settle over me. The stack of papers still lay waiting, and as I looked at them, I felt the familiar tug of those early days after Celia's father died. I was 36 when I started working full-time in the records department at Harborview Medical Center. By 2010, I had already logged more years in that building than I cared to count. The shifts were long, the pay modest, but the work was steady. When my husband passed in 2008, leaving behind medical bills that clung to us like a second shadow, I learned quickly that grief did not pause the world. Celia was 17 then, standing beside me at the funeral with straight shoulders and trembling hands. She told me she wanted to make him proud. She told me she wanted to become a doctor. I remember the first overtime shift I volunteered for. It was a Friday night in early 2010, and the hallway lights buzzed faintly above me. Linda Shaw, a nurse who had become a sister to me in everything but blood, nudged my elbow as she passed. "You sure you want another shift, Mari?" I told her I needed the extra pay. Celia had a college fair coming, books to buy, fees that kept multiplying. Linda gave me a long look, then smiled gently and said she admired my grit. From 2010 to 2013, overtime became my normal. I packed sandwiches instead of buying lunch, rode the bus instead of driving, and at the end of each month slipped a small amount into an account I labeled Future Education. I did not know if it would be enough, but I deposited every dollar with the stubborn belief that effort could fill the spaces luck left empty. In 2014, everything shifted. Daniel Harper had been a family friend for years, a financial analyst with a mind like a calculator. He met me for coffee one morning, telling me he had an opportunity for a small investment in a medical billing startup in Bellevue. He said it was risky but promising. I laughed and told him that risky and promising were usually the same thing in my life. He said if I believed in Celia's future, this might help build a stronger foundation. I sat at my kitchen table that night staring at the numbers. It was nearly all of my savings. I heard my husband's voice in the back of my mind saying that chances ignored had a way of circling back as regrets. I signed the papers the next day. 2 years later, the startup sold part of its operations, and Daniel called me with a voice I had never heard from him before. He said I should sit down. The payout was more than I had dreamed of. Not enough to change my life, but enough to give Celia a fighting chance in hers. That was when I created the Vega Medical Scholars Fund. A donor-advised fund, Daniel said, flexible but secure. I asked him to keep my name off everything. I wanted Celia to walk into her dreams without feeling she owed anyone for them. When Celia was accepted to the University of Washington School of Medicine later that same year, she danced around our small living room, holding the letter like a ticket to another world. I stood in the doorway with tears I pretended were from laughing too hard. She talked about the scholarship she received, saying it proved she had earned her place. I nodded and told her that merit had a way of shining through. In 2018, while she was in her third year, I visited her campus for a small event. She was standing beside a friend near a row of vending machines. I heard her say quietly that she was grateful she didn't have family money involved because it made everything feel clean and honest. I remember freezing for a moment, one hand on my purse strap. She looked so sure of herself, so proud, so unaware of the quiet scaffolding beneath her. I chose not to interrupt. Let her keep the pride. She would need it in the years ahead. In 2020, the startup sold entirely. The second payout was large enough for Daniel to call me twice just to make sure I understood the numbers. With that, the fund grew. The hospital began to lean heavily on the scholarships we offered. I pretended it was all routine when they sent letters addressed to the anonymous donor, thanking me for shaping the futures of dozens of medical students. Celia never once asked who paid for the grants she received. She worked hard, and in her mind, hard work meant independence. I told myself there was nothing wrong with letting her believe that. A surgeon's hands needed confidence more than gratitude. The memory faded as I returned to the present, sitting once again in my small kitchen. The papers were still spread across the table, lit by a thin line of morning sun. I gathered them slowly and placed them back into their folders. My palm rested on the front cover where the logo was printed in dark ink. Vega Medical Scholars Fund. Donor, anonymous. For a long moment, I let my hand stay there, feeling the weight of years pressed into those pages. They held every hour of overtime, every bus ride home, every choice I had made without fanfare. They held the truth of a path Celia thought she had carved alone. I closed the folder and slid it back into the box. The house was quiet and my breath felt steady again. I knew there was more I would have to face, but not yet. Today, I allowed myself the stillness of remembering the years she never saw. If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you. Chapter 3. The Daughter I No Longer Recognized. The stillness did not last long. Quiet has a way of shaking loose the noises you try to ignore, and soon enough my phone began to fill the silence. Emails from the hospital, notices about an upcoming donor event at Cascade Heart Institute. Celia's name appeared more than once in the subject lines, paired with words like keynote and award and featured speaker. By the time spring settled over Seattle in thin sheets of rain and early light, my daughter had become something of a star at the hospital. She had a paper accepted into a major cardiology journal. She was invited to speak at conferences in Portland and Denver. Nurses mentioned her name with a mix of pride and exhaustion, the way people talk about someone who was both admired and always in motion. One afternoon, Linda caught me in the hospital lobby. I still came in sometimes for volunteer shifts, helping with patient check-in or paperwork. She handed me a glossy invitation, the hospital logo embossed across the top. "They are making a whole night out of it," she said. "Donors, faculty, the board, your girl is right in the center of the program." I looked down at the card. There was Celia's photo, in a navy dress and white coat, smiling in that professional way they teach for hospital websites. A caption called her a rising leader in cardiology research. My own name appeared at the very bottom in a block of fine print, part of a list of donors that would be honored with a brief reception before the main program. "I did not know they still had me on these lists," I said. Linda shrugged. "Anonymous or not, they know that fund keeps a lot of lights on. You should go, Mari. See what your money built." On the night of the preview reception, I wore my best dress, the one I had bought years earlier for Celia's medical school graduation. The ballroom at the downtown hotel glittered under chandeliers. Staff moved through the crowd with trays of sparkling water and small canapes. I felt out of place, but I had felt out of place in fancier rooms than this and survived. Celia found me near a table of brochures. She hugged me quickly, careful not to smudge her makeup. Evan stood just behind her, dressed in a dark suit, a thin tie, his expression already set to networking mode. "I am glad you came, Mom," Celia said. "This is mostly board members and big donors, but they invited some faculty family too." She turned immediately to the group she had been standing with, a cluster of doctors and administrators. "This is my mom. She used to work in admin at Harborview. She's retired now." Used to, retired. The words landed softly but carried a distance I heard more than felt. One of the senior cardiologists, a gray-haired man with an expensive watch, gave me a polite smile. "Medical school is brutal these days," he said. "You must be proud. It costs a small fortune to get a degree now." Celia answered before I could. "It was a lot of loans and scholarships. I handled it." Her voice was light, almost joking, but there was steel underneath it. I kept my eyes at the doctor and nodded. I said that my daughter had always been determined. I did not mention transfer slips or late nights or the fund with my name hidden in its paperwork. I had chosen that invisibility. Tonight, it stung more than usual, but it was still my choice. After a while, Celia drifted away into the center of the room with Evan, shaking hands, laughing at things I could not hear. I stepped aside, closer to the wall, where the noise dulled a little. That was when a young woman approached me, balancing a plate of vegetables and a cup of coffee. "Mrs. Vega," she said a little breathless. "I'm sorry, I hope I'm not bothering you." "Not at all. How do you know my daughter?" "I rotated with Dr. Vega last year. She helped me with my first patients on the cardiac unit. She was tough, but she cared. It made a big difference for me." She shifted the cup in her hands and lowered her voice. "I also wanted to say thank you, I guess. I'm one of the residents who got support from the Vega Fund. I don't really know who runs it, but without it, I would have had to take a second job at night. My parents work in a factory in Yakima. They couldn't help much. I really wouldn't be here otherwise." My throat tightened. I smiled and told her I was sure she deserved every bit of help she received. She gave me a shy grin and hurried away toward a group of other residents. When Celia walked past a few minutes later, arm linked with Evan's, I caught a flash of the girl she used to be, the one who would have stayed an extra hour to explain a chart to someone like Emily. Later that week, I came by the hospital in the late afternoon to drop off some forms for the volunteer office. The sky was low and gray, the parking garage echoing with footsteps and slamming doors. As I walked toward the exit, voices floated up from the floor below, amplified by the concrete. I recognized Evan's smooth tone first, then another I knew from staff meetings, the clipped phrasing of Marcus Reed, the chief financial officer. Celia's lighter voice threaded between them. I stopped at the railing, unseen above, and listened. "We need to reallocate part of the charity fund into research," Marcus was saying. "Grants tied to high-profile projects bring in more money. The donors won't notice if the reports still show impact." "If it helps the department, maybe it's fine," Celia answered. She sounded tired, like someone trying to convince herself. "Charity cases don't build careers," Evan added. "Publications do, speaking slots do. You know that." There was a brief silence. I could imagine Celia looking between them, feeling the familiar pressure to be agreeable, valuable, worth the investment they believed they had made in her. "So, what are you asking me to do?" she said finally. "We want your support when we present the new budget structure. If the rising star in cardiology is on board, everyone else will follow." I did not wait to hear more. I stepped back from the railing, heart pounding in that slow, heavy way it did the day the first debt collector called after my husband died. They were talking about the fund as if it were a puddle they could redirect without consequence. They didn't know or didn't care that those dollars had faces attached to them, faces like Emily's. That night, I asked Celia to meet me outside the main entrance as her shift ended. The automatic doors opened, and she walked out under the glow of the hospital sign, shoulders sagging. When she saw me, she straightened, glancing around to see who else might be watching. "Mom, what are you doing here?" she asked. "You should have called." "I was already nearby. I wanted to ask you something." She shifted her bag from one shoulder to the other. "Can we make it quick?" I looked at her, really looked, at the white coat, the tired eyes, the phone she kept half in her hand as if afraid to miss a notification. "Do you remember why you chose this job? Why you wanted to be a doctor in the first place?" She exhaled in a sharp rush. "Mom, not this. I don't have the energy for some moral lecture after a 12-hour day. You don't understand how this world works now. Everything is grants and metrics and rankings. Please stop trying to make me feel guilty." "I am not trying to make you feel guilty," I said quietly. "I'm asking if you truly believe you got here without owing anyone anything." Her jaw tightened. She looked past me at the parking lot, at the cars coming and going, at the city lights beginning to blur in the distance. For a moment, I thought she might answer honestly, might let even a sliver of doubt show. She did not. "I have to go home. I have another early start tomorrow." She stepped around me and walked toward Evan's car, which was already idling at the curb. He lifted a hand in a brief wave that did not reach his eyes. I watched them drive away, the red tail lights disappearing into the wet Seattle evening. Something inside me shifted, a slow turning from hurt towards resolve. If they were so ready to move numbers on a screen without asking where those numbers came from, then it was my responsibility to remind them. It was time to look at the fund not as a quiet sacrifice I would carry alone, but as a lever I had the right to pull. If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you. Chapter 4. When I stopped being silent. The next morning, I called Daniel. My hands were steady as I dialed his office number, the same number I'd used when I first asked him how to make a little money stretch far enough to cover a big dream. He picked up on the second ring. "Marisol?" he said. "This is a surprise. Everything all right?" "I think it is time we talk about the fund," I answered. "Vega Medical Scholars. I need to know exactly what I can do with it." There was a brief pause, the sound of papers shifting on his desk. "Come in this afternoon," he said. "We will go over everything." His office was on the 12th floor of a glass building near downtown Seattle, all clean lines and quiet carpets. I sat in the same chair I had sat in when I first signed the documents that created the fund. Back then, my heart had been pounding with fear. Now, it thudded with a different kind of seriousness. Daniel laid a folder on the table between us. "So," he said, "the Vega Fund. It is a donor-advised structure. That means the money is yours, legally. You have made recommendations all these years, and the hospital has followed them. You can adjust those recommendations." "Adjust how far?" I asked. "As far as you want, within the law," he replied. "You can change who it supports, where it flows, even whether your name stays anonymous. For years, you have directed support to Celia and to a handful of other students. You do not have to keep doing that if you no longer want to." I took a slow breath. "I want 3 changes," I said. "First, no more direct support for Celia after this year. She can stand on her own now. Second, I want more money pushed toward residents who do not have family help, people like Emily Ortiz. And I want the clinic that serves patients who cannot pay to be a priority. Third, I want the option to have my name spoken out loud. If the hospital wants to keep the fund, they should be willing to say who is behind it at their big gala." Daniel studied me for a moment, then nodded. "You were sure about the first one?" he asked. "I am sure," I said. "If she really believes she built everything alone, I will give her that chance for real." He made notes, tapping his pen against the margin. "I will draft an amendment and send formal notice to the hospital," he said. "They will not love losing the direct line for a star follow, but they are not in a position to say no to the rest. The fund is a backbone for their internal programs." At Cascade Heart, the email landed in the inbox of the chief financial officer. Marcus Reed read it once, then again. The words did not change. The donor of the Vega Fund was redirecting support away from one high-profile fellow and toward a broader group of residents in charity clinics. The donor also reserved the right to end anonymity at an upcoming event. Within an hour, he had pulled Dr. Rowan Lee into a tight meeting in a small conference room. "Rowan," he said, "your Golden Fellow may have some turbulence in her package. The donor behind her main grant is changing direction. You need to manage expectations." Rowan rubbed a hand over his forehead. "I thought that fund was locked in for her through next year," he said. "It was. Now it is not." That evening, Celia's phone buzzed as she was leaving clinic. "Dr. Vega," Rowan said on the line, "we need to talk about your funding package. There might be some shifts next year. Nothing final yet, but you should be prepared for adjustments." "Adjustments how?" she asked, pausing in the stairwell. "Part of your stipend comes from a donor-advised fund. The donor is reallocating. We will try to smooth it out, but I wanted you to hear it from me first." She hung up and sat on the steps for a minute, staring at the concrete. When she got into Evan's car, she told him about the call. "Some donor is changing things," she said. "Rowan thinks they'll try to cover it, but it's still a hit." Evan's jaw tightened. "Which fund?" he asked. "The Vega Fund," she replied. "But that can't be right. That's the big one. They use it for everyone." Evan did not answer right away. Later that night, while Celia showered, he opened his laptop at her kitchen table and began to search. Public records, charitable registrations, old press releases tucked into the corners of county websites. It didn't take long to find it. Vega Medical Scholars Fund, registered donor contact, Marisol R. Vega, Maple Leaf Neighborhood, Seattle. He sat back in his chair, eyes narrowing. Then he closed the laptop and checked the time. It was not so late that a visit would be impossible. "I was washing dishes when the knock came at my front door. I dried my hands on a towel and opened it, to find Evan on my porch, his coat still carrying the chill of the evening. "Mr. Brooks?" I said, surprised. "Is Celia with you?" "No," he said. "She thinks I went back to the office. May I come in for a minute?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. He sat at my small table, looking almost too large for the chair. For once, he did not seem entirely sure of himself. "I'll get right to it," he said. "I know you are behind the Vega Fund. Your name is on the registration. You've been paying for a lot more around that hospital than anyone realized." I folded my hands in my lap. "And what do you want from me?" I asked. He offered a practiced smile that did not reach his eyes. "If Celia knew this," he said slowly, "her perception of you would change. She thinks you are retired and on a fixed income. She believes she did everything with loans and merit money. If she found out her mother has been the main benefactor at her hospital, that she personally benefited from that, it would shift things. She might treat you differently." I felt a brief, sharp flash of something like anger, then let it settle. If her respect depends on the size of my bank statements, it is not the kind of respect I want. I kept my name off that fund so she could walk into her career without feeling bought. I'm not interested in flashing it now just to earn her courtesy. He studied me, then leaned back. "You understand that with the changes you're making, you are shaking a lot of systems over there." "I understand exactly what I'm doing," I replied. When he left, I stood at the window and watched his car disappear down the street. The knowledge he carried would not vanish, but I had no intention of letting him be the one to weaponize it. At the hospital, Marcus weighed his options. He could push back against the new terms and risk losing a major stream of support, or he could agree to the donor's conditions and adjust his plans. In the end, the math decided for him. He sent a reply to Daniel's office confirming acceptance, including the provision about the gala. The benefactor would be publicly acknowledged for the first time at the annual donor celebration. Internal emails went out the next day, dressed in cheerful language. Celia was notified that she would be highlighted as a success story during the gala and asked to prepare a short speech about her journey. She read the message on her phone, frowning slightly, then set it aside. The part about the donor reveal barely registered. Back in my house, I pulled the storage box out once more and began to assemble a different kind of record. Copies of every transfer into the fund, letters of thanks from the hospital, scholarship notices with Celia's name on them, a printout of the legal documents Daniel had shown me. I placed everything into a neat binder, each page in its own clear sleeve. When I finished, I rested my hand on the cover and felt the weight of it, heavier than its paper should have allowed. "Tomorrow," I said softly into the quiet room, "you are going to hear the real story, mija."
If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you.
Chapter 5. The Night the Truth Walked on Stage. Morning on the day of the gala felt strangely ordinary. The same light through the blinds, the same kettle on the stove, the same creak in the hallway floorboards. Only the binder on my table changed the air around me. It waited there, heavy and silent, while I moved through small rituals of getting ready. I chose the navy dress I had worn to Celia's graduation, pressed it carefully, and pinned my hair back. I looked in the mirror for a long moment, not to judge how I looked compared to the women I knew would be at the ballroom, but to recognize myself. A 62-year-old woman who had spent most of her life behind desks and in hospital corridors, now walking into a room where her name would finally stand next to the work she had done. The hotel ballroom downtown was all soft gold light and polished floors. The Cascade Heart logo gleamed on banners along the walls. Waiters moved in smooth patterns, carrying trays of sparkling water and small bites that disappeared in one or two chews. I checked in at the registration table and received a name tag with simple black letters: Marisol R. Vega. No mention of anonymous this time. I stood near the side of the room, watching people drift in. Board members in dark suits, surgeons in tuxedos, nurses in borrowed dresses, laughing together. Then Celia arrived, with Evan at her side. She wore a deep green gown and walked with the easy confidence of someone who knew half the room would recognize her. She spotted me and gave a small wave, already being drawn toward the front where the program would start. For the first time, I did not hurry to her. I let her move in her orbit while I stayed in mine. The lights dimmed slightly, and the master of ceremonies stepped up to the small stage. He thanked everyone for coming, talked about advances in cardiology, about community care, about the importance of donors who believed in the mission. I heard the words, but my focus narrowed as he shifted to the scholarships and the fund I knew as intimately as my own heartbeat. "Tonight," he said, "they wished to honor a benefactor who had chosen to remain anonymous for years, someone whose support had shaped the journeys of many physicians, including one of their brightest rising stars, the Vega Medical Scholars Fund." A small murmur moved through the crowd. People glanced around, curious, expectant. I felt Celia's eyes searching the room without knowing what she was looking for yet. Then came my name. "Please join us in thanking Marisol R. Vega." For a moment, the room blurred. Then the sound of applause rose up, steady and surprisingly warm. I took a breath and walked toward the stage. Each step felt both unfamiliar and completely earned. I saw Celia in the front row, her expression frozen in a mixture of confusion and shock. Evan's hand tightened around her arm. I did not speak for long. I did not need to. I told them that I had worked in hospitals most of my life, not as a doctor, but as someone who filed charts and checked forms and kept things moving quietly in the background. I said that I had watched young students walk in scared and walk out as physicians, knowing that money often decided who got to stay in between. I told them that time was the most precious thing anyone could give, and that for many parents, every dollar was simply a receipt for hours they could never get back. When I stepped down, the applause came again. I did not look at Celia right away. I let her come to me. She found me near the side exit a few minutes later, her heels clicking sharply on the polished floor. Her eyes were wet, though she had not cried on stage. We went into a small conference room down the hall, away from the music and the hum of voices. The bright fluorescent light in there felt almost cruel after the golden glow of the ballroom. I set the binder on the table and opened it page by page. Tuition transfers from 2012, scholarship distributions in 2014 and 2015, research grants in 2018 and 2019. Each line carried her name, the waypoints of her path. She sat down slowly, picking up one sheet after another with trembling hands. Her face shifted as she read, confusion deepening into disbelief, then into something raw that did not have a simple word. Finally, she looked up. Her voice came out in a rough whisper. "Why did you never tell me?" "Because you wanted to believe you had done it on your own," I answered. "I wanted you to feel strong, not beholden. I was willing to carry that silence as long as you did not use it to cut me down." She swallowed hard. "All those scholarships, all those grants, it was you?" I nodded. "I built something beautiful because you worked hard, but you did not do it in a vacuum. You did it with someone holding a net under you. When you told me I had never done anything for your career, that I was wasting your time, you tore a hole in that net. I decided it was time you saw what you were standing on." She pressed the back of her mouth to her mouth, trying to keep her composure. I could see 100 arguments forming and dying behind her eyes. Pride wrestling with shame, gratitude trying to push past the instinct to defend herself. I did not ask for an apology, not yet. Instead, I closed the binder. "Next year, the fund will not pay for any part of your fellowship. You have enough of a name now to secure your own grants. There are residents who do not have that. People like Emily. They will need the support more than you." From the hallway, laughter drifted in. The world outside kept spinning, unaware of a small axis shifting in this quiet room. Evan opened the door then, his expression tense. He looked from the binder to Celia's face to mine. "This could seriously hurt your fellowship trajectory," he said to her. "You should talk to them, get this reversed, make sure you maintain your position." For the first time, I saw Celia really look at him as if she were seeing him from the outside. Her shoulders straightened. "I think my position is the one I need to think about," she said. He started to argue, then stopped when he realized the ground under his feet had changed. After a few seconds, he muttered something about needing air and left the room. Later, as the evening began to wind down, Emily approached me near the dessert table. She had changed into a simple dress, her resident badge clipped at her waist. She told me again that without the fund, she would never have made it this far, that her parents were watching from Waukima on a live stream and crying to see her in a room like this. She had no idea that I had just shifted more of the fund in her direction. Celia stood nearby, listening. I watched her watch Emily, saw the recognition in her eyes, not just of me, but of the larger circle of people whose lives had been touched by money she had barely thought about. For the first time in a long time, I saw something soft in her expression. Weeks passed, life settled into a new shape. The hospital adjusted its budgets. Emails went out about expanded support for residents from low-income backgrounds. There was some quiet grumbling from people who had enjoyed the old arrangement, but no one was foolish enough to complain too loudly in writing. One rainy Sunday afternoon, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, Celia stood there in jeans and a sweatshirt, hair pulled back, no makeup, holding a manila folder. "Can I come in, Mom?" I stepped aside. She sat at the kitchen table in the chair where Evan once sat, only now his presence felt very far away. She placed the folder between us and slid it toward me. "It's a proposal," she said. "A free cardiology clinic one Saturday a month at a community center in South Seattle. Basic screenings, medication checks, and referrals for people who fall through the cracks." I opened the folder and scanned the pages. It was thoughtful, detailed, realistic. I could hear her training in every paragraph. but I could also hear the 17-year-old girl from long ago who wanted to help people like her father before it was too late. I looked up and met her eyes. "I think the board will be very interested," I said. She exhaled, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. She did not ask for an apology in words, and I did not offer it in a speech. Instead, I stood up and walked to the stove. "Stay for tea," I said. I was just about to put the kettle on. She nodded and watched me move around the kitchen, the same way she had when she was small. The gap between us did not disappear in an instant, but it narrowed enough for us to step across if we chose. As the steam rose and the house filled with the familiar scent of brewed leaves and rain on the windows, I thought about all the parents sitting in quiet houses across this country, their names left off plaques and invitations, their sacrifices folded into the background of their children's success. Sometimes silence is an act of love. Sometimes, when that silence is mistaken for uselessness, the only way to protect that love is to let the truth speak aloud. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you think of the people who stood behind your turning points, take a moment to remember them or to reach out if you still can. And if you want more stories where justice comes not from rage, but from proof and quiet courage, stay with us, listen on, and let these voices keep you company a little longer.